Thank you for inviting me. This is a visit long overdue, but I'm delighted to be here, and I'm very grateful to all of you for coming here, breaking your schedule. End of semester is a busy time, I know that, but thank you very much. I want to confess to you why I chose this particular subject to speak about at Plaksha, and why I gave this particular title as well, borrowing from the title of the series, Moving Mountains. Most of you, if not all of you, have a science technology background. So I wanted to talk to you about somebody who was against science and technology, and you will see why I'm saying that in the course of the talk. And the second reason is much more profound. That is, the moving of a mountain or moving mountains is not just a physical act. Actually, the more important mountains that we need to move, that we need to traverse, that we need to climb are inside us. And Gandhi, more than anything else, tried to conquer the mountains that were inside him. You know, those of you who are interested in mountaineering, one of the greatest and the earliest mountaineering books to be written is by a person called Morris Herzog. The book is called Annapurna. It recounts the story of the first ascent of Annapurna, the second of the 8,000 meters mountains to be conquered, first being Everest, of course. And immediately after that, Annapurna, a French climbing team, conquered that. And Herzog was one of the ascenders. And he later wrote this book, Annapurna. And I've always been fascinated, and I quote it over and over again, the last line of the book, where he says, having written his story of his ascent, he wrote the last line. He said, "There are many more and other Annapurnas to climb." So, moving mountains, the mountains, as I said, are inside us. And I'll try and tell you in the time available to us how Gandhi attempted to move mountains, both external mountains and internal mountains as well. On a ship coming back from London to South Africa, 1909, on the ship's note paper, in a flurry of very hasty writing, Gandhi composed a book, 30,000 words written in about 9 days. We know the book as, or he called the book, the Hind Swaraj. I say he wrote it in a great flurry of writing and in only 9 days, but if you look at the original manuscript, Gujarati manuscript of Hind Swaraj, it's in the Sabarmati archives. There are only 15 cancellations or alterations, only 15 in a 30,000 word manuscript. In other words, he had his ideas completely worked out in his head. So he didn't need to alter, change, revise, or anything like that. So this is one of the reasons I believe that if Gandhi's life has any central text, Hind Swaraj is that central text. Gandhi would probably disagree with me, because when he was asked what was his message towards the end of his life, I think sometime in 47 March, he was asked what was his message. He was asked that in Bengal, and it was his day of fasting. He didn't speak it out. He wrote it in Bengali by hand. My life is my message. The Bengali being Amar Jiboni Amar Bani. my life is my message. So Gandhi would probably disagree with me when I say that there is a central text to his life. But in as much as one can talk about a central text in Gandhi's life, Hind Swaraj is that text. And I say that not out of a whim. This view of mine is based on certain pieces of evidence. Gandhi often changed his mind. As you know, he called his book, autobiography, Experiments with Truth. Experiments. So he was continuously experimenting. In other words, he was trying out views, trying out methods, etc., etc. So he was prone to changing his mind. But on Hind Swaraj, he never recanted on a single thing that he wrote. And in the winter of 1945, in a very personal letter to Jawaharlal Nehru, who, by the way, thought that the Hind Swaraj, and I now quote, was a dangerous book, quote unquote. Okay? Dangerous book. You can find this in Nehru's autobiography. He didn't say it secretly. It was out in print. Gandhi had read the autobiography, so he knew exactly what Jawaharlal thought about his book, Hind Swaraj. And to the same person, Jawaharlal, Gandhi writes in the winter of 1945, he says, I know you and I have very often disagreed on what I wrote in the Hind Swaraj. But let me tell you this. If I were the last man standing, I would not withdraw a single word of what I wrote in the Hind Swaraj. Last man standing, not withdraw a single word. So that's why I mean that if there is a central text, it is this book. So what did Gandhi write here? Briefly, I think the arguments are important, and the arguments are particularly important for a group of scientists and technocrats, to be technocrats or teachers of science and technology. The book first is written in the form of a dialogue. It's not one essay. It's a conversation that is going on between somebody called an editor and somebody called a reader. The reader is asking questions, raising doubts, and the editor is clarifying those doubts, answering those questions. I need to emphasize that the model here, the writing in the form of a dialogue, was taken from what Gandhi considered the book of his life, the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita, for those of you who haven't read it, or you're just aware of that there's a book called the Bhagavad Gita, is also written in the form of a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Okay? And there in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is a person who is raising the doubts, asking questions, and Krishna is clarifying and answering those questions. So the model is from the Gita. Now, first, it's written in the form of a dialogue, but we can thematically, I'm not saying that the book actually has two parts to it, but thematically, the book can be divided into two parts. The first part of the book is Gandhi's complete, and I underline that, complete rejection of what he considered to be Western civilization and whatever went under that rubric, Western civilization. Science and technology being two major components of that. Complete, okay? And why? It's not a baseless, completely whimsical rejection. That's the first part. I'll come explicate that. And the second part is Gandhi's alternative. What does he have in mind to replace this quote-unquote Western civilization? It is Western civilization because of its geographical location. And Gandhi said Western civilization is equal to industrial civilization or industrialization, industrial society. He used these terms interchangeably. What was the basis of this industrial society or this Western civilization? And Gandhi gave a perfectly valid historical answer to this. He said, industrial civilization is a civilization that is based on the continuous production of commodities through the aid of machines. That's what industrialization amounts to. Continuous and machine-based production of commodities. Gandhi said in such a society where the main thrust, the basis was this, infinite multiplication of commodities led to infinite multiplication of wants and demands. There were more commodities available, so people wanted more. This led to competition. I have one shirt, B has two shirts, why shouldn't I have two shirts? Okay, competition. Gandhi said competition led to conflict. Conflict led to violence. Violence led to devastation and death. So Gandhi's conclusion was, embedded in the very premise of industrial civilization, Western civilization, was the idea of violence that led to death and destruction. And therefore Gandhi said, Western civilization is a satanic civilization. I'm using his words, satanic civilization, because Satan is death, immoral death. It's not life. Satan is not life enriching. God is life enriching. So Satan is the opposite of God. Since this was not leading to the enrichment of life, it was leading to the destruction of life, it was a satanic civilization. Perfectly consistent, causally logical set of arguments. Gandhi went on to say that this civilization had arrived in India piggyback on British military conquest. And the British had not only established themselves as rulers, they had, after their conquest, they had spread their tentacles to set up institutions, administrative, judicial, educational, so on and so forth. These were all vehicles of Western, for the transmission of Western civilization. Gandhi said, now, this is 1909, there is a movement afoot. There's also an institution that is growing that wants to overthrow British rule. A movement has started. The Indian National Congress is there. It is trying to overthrow British rule and attain independence. The word that was current then, now forgotten, Swaraj. So Gandhi then went on to say that if we think we will attain Swaraj by only politically overthrowing British rule, we are looking at a very impoverished view of Swaraj. He said, the British will go away, their institutions and their influences will stay, so we will have British rule without the Britisher. That's not the Swaraj I want. Okay? So the first thematic, as I said, there are two themes. The first theme develops this, and then Gandhi actually goes in chapter by chapter in the Hind Swaraj to look at some of the major institutional presences of Western civilization and to demonstrate as best as he can why he thinks these are satanic or evil. That is the thematic part. Okay? The second part is the part that I want to put greater emphasis on. Because this is where, the second part is where Gandhi is completely original. The first part, the rejection of industrial civilization, contained ideas that Gandhi has derived from his reading of Ruskin, from his reading of Tolstoy, from his reading of Carpenter. And it was also a prevalent current in the West. There was a body of opinion, beginning with the Romantic poets like Wordsworth, Shelley, and Keats, who were also against this idea of industrial civilization, which they argued alienated man from man, and more importantly, alienated man from nature, human beings from nature. So that's not the original part. It's intellectually a derived argument. Gandhi presents it in India context with a certain degree of lucidity. The second part, I think, is where Gandhi is absolutely original, strikingly original. So he said that if that is an inadequate Swaraj, just seeking political independence, political freedom from British rule, what is an adequate Swaraj? What do I mean by the adequate Swaraj? Here Gandhi gave to the word Swaraj two meanings, two interlinked resonances. One, he said, yes, the word Swaraj, of course, means political independence, self-government. We will govern ourselves, and alien power will not govern us. But he said, Swaraj also has a more profound connotation. That is the ability to rule oneself, Swaraj, self-rule. Self-governance and self-rule. How do we become autonomous individuals capable of regulating our own lives without depending on institutions? And all those institutions were from the West, on which we were dependent. The judiciary, the democratic structure, parliament, legal system, schools, university, etc., etc. How can we free ourselves from that and take control over our own lives? Gandhi said, yes, the two were linked, because if a foreign government continued to rule us, then we would never be able to rule our own lives. And he also went on to say that if we didn't have the second meaning, the more deeper meaning of Swaraj, but yet got freedom from British rule, that also would not be an adequate, complete Swaraj. So how do we get the movement to get political independence is already underway. Remember 1909, a part of India, Bengal, has seen a massive political, popular upsurge during the Swadeshi period, directed at throwing out British rule. It's already on. How do we get to the second meaning of Swaraj? And Gandhi then goes on to the substantive part of his argument. He says, in spite of the spread of influence and institutional presence of British rule, there were large parts of India that were free, completely free from the influences of Western/modern civilization. Where were they? How could one locate these areas that were completely free from modern Western influences? Gandhi said, to do that, you have to get out of the city and go into the deep interior of India. Not just the interior of India, the deep interior of India. Villages which are still, in 1909, he said, untouched by modernity. And he said, if you go there, you will discover a life that has been an operation or a functioning of life that has been enduring for centuries. And that life, that functioning, is not based on individual selfish self-interest. It is based on a recognition of reciprocity. My needs converge, overlap with the needs of others. And therefore, there's a sense of community that exists in the rural world, in the deep rural world. And that's what has kept that rural society functioning, alive, for over centuries. Gandhi said we have to learn from that world. But the problem, he said, was we have too much baggage. We think we know. So when we go to the peasantry, to the rural world, we do not go in a spirit of humility. We go with the spirit to preach, to teach as superiors. So he said, go there to learn. But it was not easy, he admitted it. He said, to learn, to go there in the spirit of humility, you had to cultivate certain values. Through self-discipline, cultivate certain values. And he elaborated those values. He said, first, the cultivation of simplicity. What did he mean by that? Cut down your demands and wants. Lead a simple life. As simple as possible. Don't add to your list of commodities, to your possessions. As simple as possible. 2, if you had very few possessions, you would have no need to fear anybody. Because what do we fear most? That we will lose our possessions. So he said, daridra, simplicity. 2, abhay, fearlessness. And 3rd, he said, if you are not frightened of anybody, if you don't fear anybody, you don't need to hate anybody. You don't need to loathe anybody. So with abhay comes ahimsa, non-violence. So daridra, abhay, ahimsa. And then he said, if you cultivate these 3, you will be in the pursuit of satya, truth. And he said, these are the 4 pillars of my beliefs, 4 pillars of my sustenance. And if with these, cultivating through self-discipline, these 4 virtues, with these, if you go into the villages, you will learn from those villages. The future of India lies in the real India. It doesn't lie in the cities. Okay. This is 1909. I'm giving you the boldest possible outline of the Hind Swaraj argument. But it's a book worth reading, even to disagree with it. 30,000 words, it'll probably take you one evening or a little more than one evening. So well worth reading. It's a very powerful text. Gandhi is still in South Africa, 1909. It's only in 1915 that he pulls up his stumps in South Africa and decides to relocate in India. So actually what he is writing in 1909 about, quote unquote, the real India is a kind of an assumption. He still hasn't been into the deep interior of India. So when he arrives, January 1915, his political mentor in India, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, soon to die in February, told Gandhi, give me your word that for 1 year, you are not going to make any public utterances, you are not going to make any public interventions, you'll just keep quiet, observe, look, and learn. You have been away from India for a very long time. And Gandhi kept his word. For 1 year, he did not participate in any public, political, social discussion. But he did something very important. Two very important things. One, he completely transformed his appearance. The image we have of Gandhi today, man in a loincloth, bare-bodied, or a simple cloth over his torso, shaft in hand, tonsured head. It's a 1915 fashioning of Gandhi. He never again wore any kind of any other dress, attire. And there's a very important reason why he did that. It'll come later on in my talk. The other thing that he did was he traveled. If you like, this is Gandhi's discovery of India. He just didn't go to the cities. He went to what he called the real India. As if he was trying to test for himself, what I have written in the Hind Swaraj, is it valid? Or did I idealize? Did I imagine this reality? So he's traveling to find out. For 1 year, going to villages where I had no roads, you couldn't even go by bullock cart, let alone buses or trains, he walked. In the course of that, he met people, learned from them, spoke to them, and the people also realized that here's somebody different. He's not the typical congressman. Somebody different, willing to listen to us rather than preach to us. And it is in that recognition that a group of peasants, while Gandhi is in Lucknow, a group of peasants come to him. And they say that we have come from a little known district in North Bihar called Champaran. And we have come to invite you to come to Champaran. You still haven't come to Champaran. Come to Champaran and see what we are subjected to. Gandhi agrees and he goes to Champaran. 1917 this is. And he discovers that here is a very largish district in North Bihar where white indigo planters are running an absolutely tyrannical and oppressive regime, forcing poor peasants to cultivate indigo and at the worst possible economic terms, forcing them, beating them up, punishing them, torturing them, etc., etc. Gandhi sees it for himself. And what he does, and now these testimonials have at last been published, he began to collect evidence, going from peasant household to peasant household. His wife Kasturba also moved to Champaran to be with Gandhi, work with Gandhi, particularly to teach the children of Champaran and the housewives of the peasants of Champaran. That was Kasturba's own kind of project. Gandhi went around house to house, peasant house, collecting evidence. And then he presented this evidence to the commissioner who was based in Ranchi. And he said, do you know what is happening in Champaran? White commissioner, of course. He said, do you know what your countrymen are doing to my countrymen in Champaran? Read it for yourself. And then to the peasants, he said, don't cultivate indigo. Tools down. Under these conditions, till these conditions are alleviated or removed, no cultivation of indigo. This is Gandhi's 1 year of the Gokhale promise is over. This is Gandhi's first public appearance. And suddenly, an obscure lawyer from South Africa begins to get prominence because the commissioner also wakes up, had no idea, or if he had idea, he hadn't taken any steps, and they begin to remove some of these extortionate, exploitative practices practiced by the white indigo planters. So Champaran undergoes a kind of a transformation in 1907, thanks to Gandhi's intervention. And this is Gandhi's first appearance, if you like, the Champaran Satyagraha. Hands down, tools down, we are not going to work under these conditions. He tries out Satyagraha end of 1718 in Bardoli in Gujarat, among the jute mill workers, among the cotton mill workers in Ahmedabad. All this, of course, is overtaken by the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh. April 13, 1919. All of you know about it, I'm not going to repeat it, where an unarmed, peaceful crowd was fired upon by machine guns in an enclosed garden in Amritsar. British official figures were 300 dead. The Indian unofficial calculation was over 800. The country was stunned into silence, and Gandhi then decided that the time had probably come to move from local protest movements like in Bardoli or Champaran to a pan-Indian movement. But to do that, to initiate a pan-Indian movement, this is the first physical moving of mountains. You needed a vehicle. You couldn't do it alone. You needed an organization that would be capable of an all-India movement. He chose an existing organization, the Indian National Congress. But, and this is the more important part, he completely changed it. What was the Indian National Congress pre-Gandhi? An organization that met once a year after Christmas and discussed certain issues over cucumber sandwiches and cups of tea. Okay? Gandhi said, this won't do. This is not the organization that can carry out a pan-Indian movement. The Congress must have a presence, even if it be one man sitting on a broken chair or a broken charpoy in every village or every cluster of villages across India. And he proceeded to do that. And he said, first at the village level, the block level, that level would be connected to the district level. The district level would be connected to the provincial level, and the provincial level would be connected to the All India body, AICC. Whatever might have happened to the Congress, or whatever might have been done to the Congress, this is still the organizational structure of the Congress. It is entirely Gandhi's creation. Block, district, province, nation. Linking locality, province, and nation through one organizational structure. So that is how he solved the organizational problem. But running parallel, he also knew he had another problem. Money. He needed resources. Otherwise, how do you maintain this organization? So he started what he called the Tilak Swaraj Fund. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, named after him, Swaraj Fund, raising of 2 crores, a lot of money those days, nothing today, 2 crores in 1 year. But here is where the characteristic Gandhi twist comes. He said, no donations of more than 2 rupees would be accepted. So it's not that you go to G.D. Birla or Jamshedji Tata, who signs a check of 50 lakhs, and a large part of your target has been met. He said, no, 2 rupees. Nothing less than 4 annas, nothing more than 2 rupees. Now, look at the implication of this. Okay, let me just paint this picture for you a little bit. That one man sitting on a broken chair or charpoy under a tree in a village with a broken tin in the morning when people of the village have gathered to have their chai and have some gupshup, they're sitting there. This man appears and he said, I'm collecting for the Tilak Swaraj Fund launched by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and anything between 4 annas and 2 rupees, whatever you want to give. So you have a range of responses to this. One response is a grumpy old man who says, oh, please don't bother me about this first thing in the morning. Yeah, get out. Okay, one. The other response is, okay, will you leave me alone if I give you 8 annas? Of course, 8 annas. Okay, the other response is, I don't have any money today. Can I give it to you tomorrow? Okay, come tomorrow, promise you. Fourth response is more important. Today I can give you 4 annas, but I see you sitting under that tree every day. So tell me a little bit about your work. Who is this Gandhi? What is Swaraj? What is the Tilak Swaraj Fund? Talking point. Then hearing all this, you might say, may I join you? Okay? So the 2 crores target was filled in less than 1 year. And when in the winter of 1920, Gandhi launches his first non-cooperation movement, first pan-Indian movement. He calls it non-cooperation movement. He is surprised, the Congress is surprised, and most importantly, the British are surprised by the response that call gets. Tens of thousands of people, men and women, come out on the streets to protest against British rule, to non-cooperate with British rule. That word is very important. I won't go to British legal courts, I won't go to British universities, British meaning Indian universities in India, so on. Anything that's connected. We won't wear British clothes, won't wear British jewelry, particularly important for women. Now, imagine this. No internet, no Instagram, right? No mobile phone. All on the basis of word of mouth. That single solitary individual at the block level who is going with his broken tin box and talking about Swaraj, about Gandhi, etc., etc. This is what happens. And this is the first major all India mass movement that occurs. Gandhi has literally moved a mountain, right? But moving a mountain can often also lead to disasters, individual and ecological disasters. On the 5th of February, 1922, the movement is already 2 years, little more than 2 years old, more than 2 years old. A very angry crowd attacks a police chowki in a very small town. I mean, if this incident that I'm going to describe to you hadn't occurred, you wouldn't have heard of this town, or let alone locate it on a map. Now it's a famous place because of the narrative of the Indian national movement. It's a place called Chauri Chaura in Bihar, in Gorakhpur. Okay? A very angry crowd attacks the police chowki in Chauri Chaura and sets it on fire, killing 22 policemen. And while they are carrying out their act of violence, this is an act of violence, what is the cry on their lips? Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. The apostle of non-violence is being invoked to carry out an act of violence. So between Gandhi's message and the receiving of his message by the people of India, there was a large divorce or a large gap, if you like. What did Gandhi do? This movement is at its height, 22. He gets the news of what had happened in Chauri Chaura, 6th of February in the afternoon, late afternoon. The first thing he does, he says, I am withdrawing from this movement. It has gone against my fundamental principles. I have nothing to do with this movement. I have made a mistake. A Himalayan blunder is the phrase he coined. He said, others who are involved in the movement, they want to provide leadership to the movement, can do so. I am no longer associated with this movement. In other words, he was not willing to compromise his fundamental beliefs, something very few of us have the moral courage to do. It's another mountain he's moving, not immediately visible. He's imprisoned because the British know the non-cooperation movement was masterminded by Gandhi. And this is where I'm bringing in a point that I left somewhat hanging when I talked about his self-fashioning, that image that he presented to the world and to India. The trial takes place. This is Gandhi's first trial in India. Ahmedabad, 1923. Packed courtroom. Gandhi, as you know, was a trained lawyer. He was a barrister at law from the Inner Temple. So he said he would plead his own case. So he's the accused who is also pleading for the accused. So as per court protocol, he's put on the dock. And the judge says, again, following court protocol, your name? Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Your occupation? Farmer and weaver. The court listened in hushed and shocked silence. The man who was the undisputed leader of the Indian National Congress didn't say he was the undisputed leader of the Indian National Congress. He didn't say, I'm a trained barrister from the Inner Temple of your own country. It was a white judge. He didn't say a week ago a Christian bishop had called him the Christ of the 20th century. He could have done any of these things with great truth without deviating from facts. He didn't. He said farmer and weaver. I want to dwell on this point a little bit because very often, many times when I have narrated this incident, people have turned to me and said, oh, it was a piece of political theater. Of course it was a piece of political theater. Who denies that? But the question is, as students of history, what we have to answer is why did he choose this particular form of theater? He chose that because he wanted to all of India and Indians to know that he alone wasn't being tried. That's why he identified with the commonest Indian, farmer and weaver. And he said, I am not being tried indirectly. All of you are under trial. India is being tried here. It's India that is being accused. And it is because he had very deeply ingrained in his heart this identification with the common Indian, that he had fashioned himself in that manner, like a traditional Indian peasant, loincloth, bare-bodied, shaft in hand. That's how a peasant goes to his field every morning, even today. Conscious decision to identify with the commonest Indian. I am part of you, I am with you. That's why even some of his skeptical followers used to say, somehow you have magic, you can feel the pulse of the people. When Gandhi decides that he is going to mobilize the civil disobedience movement on the basis of salt, by breaking the salt monopoly, Nehru writes to him. He said, Bapu, what are you doing? How does salt matter? I was thinking you would take up a bigger issue. Then, of course, you know what happens once he breaks the salt monopoly. And it's the same Nehru who is writing, Bapu, you have magic in your hands. Whoever thought salt would mobilize millions? Only you know the pulse of the Indians. None of us do. Okay? So this is why, because of the identification. My answer to this puzzle is because of the identification. He didn't think of himself as being different from the commonest Indian. And his first step towards that identification was to refashion himself, his appearance, rather. And then to stand up in court and say, I'm nothing more, nothing less than farmer and weaver. Okay? So, the ability to physically move mountains. I'll move from the political sphere, the physical sphere of Gandhi's activities to his inner mountains and how he conquered those. Just two very poignant examples. Gandhi's eldest child was his son, Hiralal Gandhi, with whom Hiralal fought a lifelong battle against his father. He fashioned himself to be everything that his father wasn't. Okay? And why is that? Because Hiralal wanted to go and study in England, in South Africa. By this time, Gandhi was well on his way to rejecting everything Western and modern. So he said, no, I can't allow my children to do that. And you can't go. So Hiralal left home, his parents. And he left behind an open letter to his father, which he published. It's an anguished and powerful letter that he wrote to his father, calling him all sorts of things, some of them valid, some of them not so valid, etc., etc. But that's not and they remained alienated all through their lives. And there is this anecdote. 1926, Gandhi and Kasturba are on a train that is going to Bombay but is passing through central India. And somewhere before Nagpur or after Nagpur, I don't remember exactly, there's a short halt or 2 minutes or something in a very small station. And how do we get to know so vividly as I'm going to describe to you? How do we know this? Because the son of Gandhi's secretary, his secretary was Mahadev Desai's son, Narayan Desai, was actually on the train in the same compartment with Kasturba and Gandhi. And Narayan Desai records this. So Narayan Desai said the train entered this obscure central Indian station. And he said, over the din and bustle of an Indian railway station, we heard one voice which said, Mata Kasturba ki jai. It kept on saying this. And then the train stopped, came to a standstill, and I found that across the window from our train compartment, there stood a man, unshaven, hair uncombed, dirty dhoti, unkempt kurta. And it suddenly struck me, this is Hiralal Kaka. And Hiralal Kaka put his hand into his kurta pocket, took out a withered orange, and said, "Ba, I have brought this for you." Kasturba, as you can imagine, tears in her eyes, took that withered orange. And Gandhi said, "You haven't brought anything for me. Hiralal said, "No, I haven't got anything for you, but I have come a long distance to tell you something." So Gandhi said, "Tell me." He said, "You know, people call you Mahatma." So Gandhi said, "I know, unfortunately, they call me Mahatma." He said, "You would be nobody," Hiralal Gandhi said. "You would be nobody but for that woman sitting next to you." Gandhi said, "I know that, Hiralal. Much more than anybody else does, I know that. But let me tell you something now, as a father. I can see that you haven't eaten, not just today, you haven't eaten for days. Come on the train. I'll buy your ticket. I'll tell the ticket collector, you're my son, and buy your ticket. Share our food, our simple food. And if you don't want to carry on to Bombay with us, get on the next station. Get off at the next station. But come and share. Ba will be happy, I will be happy if you come and share that food." Narayan Desai writes, Hiralal Kaka was unmoved. The whistle blew. The train began to move. And the last thing we heard was a voice that said, "Mata Kasturba ki jai." I ask you, or I invite you to feel the anguish of a parent, father and mother, at this alienation from the eldest born. Gandhi was later to write in his autobiography, "Hiralal was the first victim of my experiments with truth." Jump cut. 43 rather. Kasturba they are in prison, well, kind of a prison, not actually a physical prison, but they are in house arrest, if you like, in the Aga Khan Palace, which Gandhi has transformed into a kind of a mini ashram. And Kasturba is seriously unwell. Seriously. Doctors have said there's very little to be done, but there is a new drug just discovered called penicillin. If we can administer penicillin to her, there's a chance, we are not guaranteeing anything, but there's a chance that her life might be prolonged. She might be able to live a few years. We don't even know whether a few years or not. Hearing this, Gandhi's youngest son, Devdas Gandhi, the father of Gopal Krishna Gandhi, borrowed money, in fact, to buy penicillin. And he brought it to have it injected to Kasturba. Gandhi said, "Devdas, over my dead body, you know, your mother and I have for years completely rejected Western medicine. Your mother is no longer conscious. She is in coma. So she cannot give her consent. If she gave her consent, I have no problems. If she said, yes, I'll take penicillin, I would have no. But she can't give her consent, so I will not allow it. Let her go. But let her go with her principles intact." don't do it. So the penicillin wasn't administered. Kasturba died. I mean, she might have died in any case with the penicillin also. And her funeral pyre is being lit. Devdas is in fact lighting the funeral pyre. Gandhi is standing a few yards away, and next to him is this English lady, Madeline Slade, who had come to stay in Gandhi's ashram, and Gandhi used to call her Meera. So therefore, in the ashram, she was Meera Behen to everybody. She's world famous as Meera Behen, not as Madeline Slade. By the way, she was an British admiral's daughter who gave up every single privilege and status that she had enjoyed as an admiral's daughter in British society to come and be with Gandhi. Next to him is Meera Behen. And Meera writes, "It's the only time in my long association with Bapu that I saw him cry. And he turned to me and he said, 'Meera, the best part of me is gone. What will I do now? What will I do now?' If you don't ask that question, you cannot move your internal mountains." Thank you.